So the Labour government is to announce plans to release prisoners in the coming days to ease overcrowding in cells. Speaking to reporters on a trip to the NATO summit in the US, Sir Keir Starmer said, "Some of what we've found is shocking. Not so much about the finances, but I have to say on prisons, the situation is worse than I thought it was. I'm pretty shocked that it's been allowed to get into that situation. It's reckless to allow them to get into that place." However, one figure from the previous administration hit back saying, "We held our nerve on this for months and found other ways to keep the system operational and get new prison places online." Labour have bottled it. So, with as many as 40,000 criminals to be released early onto our streets, will crime go up under Labour? Let me know your thoughts by heading to gbnews.com/your say. You can tweet me at gbnews. Go and vote in our poll while you're there. But I'm joined now by retired police officer Norman Brennan and former prisoner, now charity founder and best-selling author Mark Johnson. Chaps, thank you very much. Looking forward to this. Look, Norman, I'll start with you. I'll be honest with you, I am finding it hard to believe that by releasing as many as 40,000 criminals back out onto the street early, that crime won't go up under Labour. But what's your thoughts?
It absolutely will go up under Labour. Policing is in crisis. We haven't got enough police officers. More are resigning than actually joining. All the experienced officers are gone. We've got knife crime epidemic levels. We've got shoplifting epidemic levels, as well as car theft. All two of those are costing us £2 billion each a year. We've got so many criminals out on the streets that should have been sent to prison, but because of the overcrowding already are there. There's two people or two types that go to prison, Patrick. One is where the crime is so serious, and the other is where the crimes are so persistent. Of course, if you commit a very serious crime, like a rape, a robbery, gun crime, you have to go to prison. If you've exhausted all of the alternatives to imprisonment, then the magistrates and judges have a right and a duty and no alternative but send you to prison. So if we've got the right people in prison, Patrick, how can we have too many people in prison? We clearly haven't got the prison places or the foresight of this problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's possibly another area that has not kept up with the population explosion that this country has seen in the last 20, 30 years or so. Mark, I'll whiz it over to you now, because from my perspective, just, guy just goes around his business every single day. I see things happening in my local shops, like people just walking in and nicking stuff, right? And they don't seem to care about any of the consequences. Obviously, we're all well aware of things like knife crime, etc. And I just wonder, by having people released earlier than anticipated, what kind of message it sends to those people? If we already have people who don't fear the consequences, what's going to happen now?
Well, I mean, strangely, it suggests that before, when the prison numbers were kind of under control, that we had some kind of rehabilitation techniques in prison and programs in prison that actually worked. And quite frankly, that's never been the case. The reason that people go to prison and have, for a number of years, being severely neglected, actually. The prison system itself, I mean, it's sort of a consequence from over-politicising the justice system for the last 15 years, for sure. Where they've said that the rhetoric is tough on crime, longer sentence stuff. There's no evidence to say that longer sentences reduce reoffending at all. You've got America to look at, 1.5 million in prison, 1 in 9 people in the American population in prison, yet they've got higher reconviction figures than we have. I think what you're looking at is, like, 5 years ago, the Conservative government increased the summary conviction from the magistrates' courts up to 2 years. And that's a group of people that aren't really trained, that aren't representative of the community, and actually that's increased the prison numbers. The other one is 15,000 people in British prisons now are there for recall. So they're not actually committed crimes. They've not turned up.
With respect to that, though, isn't it that they committed crimes, they were released, and then they broke their bail conditions, and now they're back again? So I mean, some would argue that maybe indicates that they shouldn't have been released in the first place.
It's indicative of
I will come back to you. Okay, fine. I will come back to you, mate. But look, I just want to say, so knife and gun crimes, robbery and theft are currently rising in Britain. There is a shoplifting epidemic at the moment. It is apparently its worst for 20 years. Figures show almost 1,200 cases of shop thefts are being reported every day. That is up by a third in a year. There is also a little bit of this going on as well.
People.
Yeah, Norman, what do we do about this? Is there a case to say that there's much point in locking somebody up for 10 years with no rehabilitation, making them serve their entire sentence, and then they are unemployable afterwards? I mean, this new prisons guy, Timpson, has put his money where his mouth is, the way he runs his shops and things like that. He does employ a lot of people who are leaving prison, and, is there much point in keeping people locked up for longer, in your view?
Well, the alternative is we just release everybody and we have anarchy on our streets. The thing is, where somebody has committed such a serious crime or persistent crime, when they're in prison, they're not plaguing victims, they're not plaguing society. And let's actually look at what prison's all about. It's to punish, to deter, to reassure and to rehabilitate. Now, I can tell you now, Patrick, there are tens of thousands of people on the streets of Britain that should actually be in prison but weren't sent there. So we've got them on the streets. We're now having probably tens of thousands of others released after only 40% at a time. What message does that send? I'll tell you what message it sent. Weak sentencing on offenders is tough sentencing on the victims and society. And the thing is if there's no rehabilitation or correct rehabilitation, that should be worked at. The last government, they closed 17 prisons, failed to build 5. And Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper cannot say they didn't know the problem. Right. They were shadowing this government for 15 years.
I think there is, and it is, by the way, not just to do with prisons. We are going to see this for pretty much every single department for probably the next few years, where it's, and there might be some truth in this, by the way, but the Labour Party are going to say, oh, gosh, we've just had a look at this. It's even worse than we thought, so we're going to have to do more. So I think there is a bit of that going around. You're absolutely right to point that out. I'll just bring you back in, Mark, on this now. I heard what you said about America. Fine, I understand that. I would possibly counter that by suggesting that some countries that do have really harsh laws, and I'm not for a single second advocating the kind of judicial system they have in Saudi Arabia, for example, but I imagine the crime rate in Saudi Arabia is quite low. So I wonder if that kind of nullifies the old softer, gently approach, Mark.
Well, no, I mean, there's two sides to this. I mean, the disinvestment into prison and rehabilitation, I've got to tell you, I've just spent 16 days in 6 British prisons, right? And it's the default mental health institution fact, right? So 70% of all people in there, we're prescribing our way out of one problem and prescribing our way into another, and the whole drug trajectory is changing from heroin, illegal street drugs, now into second and third sentences on prescriptions that they actually got on entry into prison in the first place. So when, if you're committing a crime and it's a drug related or whatever, and you're going into prison, the first person you meet is a doctor and you're getting a prescription, you're not getting any kind of programs because of the understaffing. Probation, when you get out, is literally over capacity by 130% in London, for instance. So it's neglect from the state. You know what I mean?
So why are we releasing them? Why are we releasing them if they can't be put under probation? I can tell you Patrick.
Well, simply because the political decision made, because justice has been politicised, they've put the rhetoric out to the public about being tough on crime, but that we haven't had the capacity to house that group of people.
You're an ex-offender. You're an ex-offender. For 45 years, I've been a police officer and a leading campaigner on law and order. I have picked up the devastation that you leave behind. Now, the thing is, I've got no problems with people being given an alternative to imprisonment. But when you breach them, and all these people that tell me that you go to prison to learn new tricks, I can tell you thousands of prisoners that I've actually interviewed, arrested and charged, that there's very few new tricks to learn. They see prison as a short respite to go out and offend. And if we're going to go and release tens of thousands on top of all the others that should have been in prison but are not, I can tell you, Patrick, there's a perfect storm coming, and you will get me back in a year or two if I'm still about, and we'll be talking about the tsunami.
The sad reality from a prisoner perspective, right, is that we've got a situation that even though there is literally nothing in prison to rehabilitate people, it is better than actually their lives out in the community. And that's the perception of large numbers of people in British prisons at the moment.
right,
So it's a
That's
scourge on
a
society.
reality.
All right,
There's only one option that they've got, and I think now is the time to do it, and that's reduce the prison numbers to be able to build back an effective justice
I do
system.
wonder.
Victims have already been a victim once. Victims have already been a victim once. The public have been protected from them, and now we're releasing out the people.
All right, guys. All right, we're out of time. We're out of time. But thank you very much. Again, I'll say this. We wanted a head-to-head, and we did get one. So both of you, thank you. All right.